a leading member of the House Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees, Congressman Peter King of New York. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us. Have you been briefed on the so-called ISIS hit list, the targeting of these 100 members of the U.S. military for not only attack, but beheadings, death?
Yeah, well, not necessarily on this particular one, and I'm not sure if this is entirely new, but for the last 6 months we've been briefed on how ISIS is assembling names, addresses, phone numbers, basically using, as Pamela Brown said, social media. People on Facebook, they will say their husband or their wife is in Afghanistan, or they're coming home soon, or whatever. And then just newspaper reports about veterans returning home, or someone being wounded. And they can, so really from really open source and from the internet, it's basically ISIS has been able to track this down. And again, I don't think that we have to be too concerned right now about an organized ISIS force in this country carrying out attacks. My concern is, I believe what the Justice Department believes, is that we're talking about lone wolves. For instance, what we saw back in Queens, back in October, where we had the ISIS supporter, the ISIS sympathizer, who was radicalized over the internet using the hatchet attack on the 2 police officers. Or we saw up in Canada when the Canadian Parliament was attacked. So I think what ISIS is doing here is appealing to supporters, fringe supporters, people on the fringes of society who will act out. But again, we have to be looking for actual ISIS cells. But I think the immediate threat would come from someone who's a deranged person or a lone wolf who's influenced by ISIS. So it's a real concern.
It certainly is. And what this ISIS so-called hacking division, what they said is to their supporters, their sympathizers here in the United States, if you can't come fight with us here in Iraq or Syria or Yemen or Libya or whatever, stay where you are. But here's a list of U.S. military personnel. Here are their names, their addresses, their pictures. Go ahead and behead them, kill them if you can. Now, here's the question. Should these people be getting special protection?
I believe yes, and they probably are in the local communities. The answer is yes, they should be. There should definitely be protection for anyone whose name is there. And quite frankly, anyone in the community who is known to be a military person, a person whose name has appeared, even if it's not on this list, I would hope that the local police, in conjunction with the military, would be providing some level of security for them. And certainly anyone whose name is there should be getting security, and I would be very surprised if they don't have some form of security detail on them.
I agree with you, although we had heard earlier today, Congressman, and I'm sure you'll check this out, that as of now, there's been no decision to actually provide them with additional security, post guards, for example, outside their homes, or move them to other locations. But it's obviously a very worrisome development.
If I would just say,
go ahead.
Just saying that, just again, from my experience in New York, whenever something like this happens, certainly the local police will provide a level of security for anyone whose name has appeared or anyone who could be targeted by a terrorist.
Yeah, but that may be in New York, but it's not necessarily throughout the entire country, where there may be more limited resources. But I agree with you, because I'm sure their family members, if they see their names popping up and their pictures, their addresses and all, they must be terrified. Don't you agree?
I certainly would. I certainly am. And again, we're thinking not just of the personnel themselves, but their spouses, their kids, their neighbors. If ISIS could attack anyone that has even a tangential connection to one of these military people, that's a psychological victory for ISIS, and it would have a devastating impact on the American people.
Now, have you learned for sure that this is really ISIS doing this, or somebody else who's pretending to be ISIS just to instill fear?
I'm not certain on this. No, I've not been briefed on this particular listing, but we do know that ISIS and Al-Qaeda itself, I should say Al-Qaeda affiliates, are monitoring names of military personnel, and going back as far as 6 months ago, not just here in this country, but also in Europe. The Pentagon has been urging the American military to have as small a footprint as possible as far as social media is concerned, because anything, even the most harmless picture, Instagram, whatever, about personnel themselves or their family members or their friends, relatives, whatever, that could end up making them a target for ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any of this really alphabet soup of groups that are out there.
I'm sure a lot of military families right now, they're cutting back on their social media for good reason. Congressman, I want you to stand by. We have new information coming in about what ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these Iranian-backed Shiite Houthis in Yemen are doing now that the U.S. has not only evacuated the embassy, but pulled out all U.S. special